hey, why do we need this bill? Oh, because we're 100% reliant on China. So what's a pivot to Asia mean? It's a pivot to nowhere. Because what are we going to do? Are we going to get into a proxy war with China? Are we going to get into an actual shooting war with China? Okay, can we time out? Can you give us some more gyroscopes so we could build more cruise missiles to launch at you? I bet they don't give them to us. We spend an inordinate amount of time in Washington, D.C. The amount of dedication that Mr. Kennedy has shown to this, his wife and my wife are going to file for joint divorces pretty soon. Because if we spend any more time doing this.
So this is kind of a report card. After, something like 60 trips to Washington, D.C., easily 250 meetings with members of Congress or their staff, I can tell you definitively that there is no single member of Congress willing to put forward a thorium energy bill on its own merit. It's just not going to happen. Why don't we have a champion in Congress? Why isn't there that congressman? Where's Mr. Smith goes to Washington, right? Where is he? Well, he needs funding to stand there on the floor of the Senate or the floor of the House. He needs somebody's money. And where does he get that money? Let me give you some names. It might be familiar. Exxon, BP, the Koch brothers, Brown and Root, the Saudis. The entire defense industry is in the business of controlling energy resources on a global scale, okay? So the defense industry is actually part of the hydrocarbon industry. Where are all of our assets? Where do we send the Sixth Fleet every 2 months? The Middle East. Why? Because they have energy. Because we want to contain and control energy. And who's the most powerful industry in the United States today? The finance industry. They've got trillions of dollars riding on all the hydrocarbons that we've ever found or we're going to find. They don't have a penny in this. And why would they put a penny in this? Because we'll take the Sixth Fleet, go into some country, and take somebody else's oil, and it's going to go to their bottom line. So I know everybody in here wants to get a thorium bus and drive around and get people fired up. No, what we have to do is bring the pain to the members of Congress. You have to bring the pain to them. Anybody on that list who's got a stake in the game has a stake in the political process, right? And if you're doing the right thing and you're threatening their game, the finance guys, their enemy is their friend. They'll go create or fund an environmental group that goes out and literally creates enough political activity against what you're doing to kill it. So what do we do to build a viable platform that can actually get passed politically and then function viably? Well, thorium and rare earths are not only linked at the mineralogical level, but at the geopolitical level. At first, we went in and told members of Congress how important it was economically. They didn't get them excited. So then we said to them, look, it's undeniable that rare earth issue is a national security issue, right? You have a constitutional obligation to take some action. We got a bill introduced late last year. It wasn't, last year was the first year in 50 years that were no amendments for the Armed Services Bill, the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. So last year we got knocked out through a awkward trick of history. First time in 50 years we couldn't get on the bill. This year the bill was offered up as a standalone bill and things were going swimmingly. You want to know how does this help develop molten salt reactors, right? Well, if you read the bill actually creates a federally chartered corporation with congressional authority to develop uses and markets for thorium, including energy, right? Regulatory pathway issues behind you. The Thorium Corporation is authorized to develop commercial uses for thorium under a multinational platform. This is important because the U.S. is broke. You know, UK's broke, Spain's broke, everybody's broke. But if you created a multinational platform and you could get all of your allied partners to invest, or if you scared them enough about the geopolitical risk of not investing, you could get all of your NATO partners to invest, right? And if it's only $100 million from each country, you're to $1 billion pretty quick and you're on your way. So it's a multinational platform authorized, congressionally authorized to develop thorium energy and to do it with sovereign states as partners. It also creates an industrial products corporation, do some of the incredible things that were talked about, alloys, catalysts, medical isotopes, and other products. You basically create a corporation that can act like the underwriter laboratory, right? They can say, hey, you've got this fantastic idea for thorium, it's a regulated material, nobody will loan you money, and you may not have a market because of regulators. You come inside, we'll help you raise the capital, and we will act as an underwriter and work with the regulators to make sure your product can be put into an industrial market or a military market or the proper market and provide the guarantees so that we can commercialize this fantastic element. Of course, it solves the rare earth problem. It does that fairly simply. The United States throws away enough rare earths every single year to meet 50% of global demand. Unlike the stuff we're mining today, which is very low quality ores that only represent half of the rare earths and lanthanides you need, this stuff we're throwing away, it has all 16 elements, all recoverable, but it's got thorium with it. So until we solve the thorium problem, those materials just keep getting dumped. We create a rare earth cooperative that can be, that's chartered by the government, that allows for, in fact, the regulations require we get international investment partners. So Japan, who's losing all their technology base to China, can say, hey, no more China. We're going to go invest in this cooperative, and so is Korea, and so is the EU, and we're going to build our own value chain around a guaranteed supply of rare earth resources. So, of course, we do both. This is the thing that Congress pays attention to because it is a definable, certifiable national security issue. Okay, so in this political environment, you can't spend money, so we don't use any money. In fact, we even reimburse the government for any paperwork they had to do. That's called administrative, okay? All right, what this bill would do for the first time in a long time, it would provide and guarantee for a fully integrated value chain in the United States to end the defense industry's dependence on China. And the reality is 100% of the rare earth materials used in every weapon system we deploy in the United States and our NATO partners is 100% reliant on China. So that means every single defense contractor in the United States is violating federal law. So, didn't see any problems there. We're going to fix it, right? While I'm talking, behind me is just a small little sampling of U.S. weapon systems that are 100% reliant on China for. Okay? And if you look, the text shows multiple systems, multiple parts, multiple components for some of these. And, sadly enough, defense contractors understand politics, fear, and jobs. So on this one here, there's probably parts going into any one of these larger systems in 20 or 30 states. What does that mean? You can blackmail 20 or 30 senators, right? What's amazing is we're not showing you any of the small systems. The systems our soldiers carry. You know, you're flying around in one of these things, you're pretty comfortable, right? What about the soldier with the Stinger missile and a GPS? That's also rare earth dependent. So these are just the bigger systems. So John and I showed all of this at the Congressional Briefing. And at the Congressional Briefing, when we walked out, we saw the expression on everybody's face. We felt pretty good, right? We're like, wow, they got to do this, right? This is a national security issue, and if we don't fix this, we've got serious problems. Federal law is behind us. How could they possibly ignore the opportunity to fix this problem? Okay, it's not like we couldn't have ever conceived this, but shortly after that meeting where we basically felt like we'd knocked it out of the park, we're contacted by the Senate office that was the lead sponsor, and we were told that the Department of Defense injected itself and contacted members of the Armed Services Committee and said they wanted this bill killed. The Defense Department killed this bill. When you're faced with the prospect of doing your job and conforming to federal law, they killed the bill. You know, I don't think you guys realize that literally every time you send a check to the Thorium Energy Alliance, it's paying for a flight into Washington, D.C. and FaceTime with legislators. We've done everything we possibly can. We've shared the cost, and we've carried this thing as far as we can. What we need right now is we actually need everybody in this room to digest what I'm telling you. Reach out to your congressional representative. You can pull all of this off my website, or it'll be on John's tomorrow or whatever. And you need to demand that someone in the United States Congress enforce the law and end this practice. Anybody with a box of crayons needs to start writing op-eds. And you need to send them to your local paper, and you need to send them to national papers, because the only way we can change the decision by the Department of Defense is to call them out. Right? They made this decision, and nobody in this room is supposed to know about it. Right? You're never supposed to know that the Department of Defense injected itself into the legislative process to hide 25 years of policy failure. Right? The most expensive defense industry in the world. In any extended conflict, China controls the outcome. There's a very good paper you can get off my website, came out of India, that said, regardless of who develops new rare earth applications, technologies, metallurgy, all of the benefits accrue to China because they're the only place in the world that has a value system to develop them. So what's the point of a national lab? What's the point of anybody's work in here if we're dealing with advanced technologies that require any rare earths? And if you've got an idea, air the idea, because John and I have pushed this thing as far as we can. Literally, we need a fire. Literally, we need to cause some pain for the people that are letting this happen.
What is the rationale of the Department of Defense for opposing the bill?
I can assure you there's no rationale based on their job description, right? 25 years of systematic failure to notice what China was doing. It wasn't top secret. China published their intentions. They were proud of it. They had Program 863 and 972. They published their objectives. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have the internet and you couldn't Google Translate, but I'm sure somebody in the Pentagon had a job to read the frickin' newspaper. It was in the newspaper. So it's cover your ass. That's all it was. The only other thing it could possibly be is that the defense contractors went to their friends in the Department of Defense who would one day be giving them a job and said, you better kill this because if we get cut off from China, we can't build more missiles and bombs.
They might get prosecuted.
They need to get prosecuted.
Yeah, they need to get prosecuted. One of the other things, just a little follow-up to that, if you go down that rabbit hole a little further, some of the rationale for the companies might be that, you know, the assets that these very large companies have are moving to China. And there might be a point at which there is a greater reason to protect those assets than the diminishing assets in the very flat market that we have in the United States. That's the market of the future. There's a lot more incentive, you know, money and companies have no country. There's no patriotism, you know, in a company. And if the people see that their future lies somewhere else, they aren't going to do anything to jeopardize their company in an act of trying to save their supposed home country. There is no home country for a multinational corporation. It's just, where do we extract the next dollar? And more it is not the United States of America. More and more it is elsewhere.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I got a taste of this year. I met with my congressman, Duncan Hunter, and he's actually in favor of this. So I think he's a good guy to push a little bit harder. And I know his uncle, so we can go and we can move him a little bit faster. And I think it is not cover your asses, cover your supply chain. They developed this $1 billion supply chain. They don't want to wreck it. It's going to cost them a lot of money to try to mess with that. So I think that's where it comes down to. It's you know, all their constituents are in the current supply chain. They cut that supply chain and make it obsolete. All of a sudden they have a huge problem. They don't want to deal with it.
I'll just say, as I walk back to Jim, Duncan Hunter was our original House side sponsor of the bill, and at the last minute he pulled out also. So Duncan Hunter was, unfortunately, who we put all our eggs. It was a strategic error. Our folks in Washington that help us made a mistake by trusting any one congressman too much.
What do you think of the strategy to lobby to have the DOE split into two?
It's not, you know, it's how the FAA works. That's not going to really help this situation much, unfortunately, but...
The way the bill's designed, you don't have to do that. That's somebody else's battle. That's not our battle. We would actually be authorized to take an investment and begin the work and develop a reactor. And the beauty of this is you're actually a multinational platform. So we could build it, design it in the United States, and then we could actually test it and market it through Canada, through their much more realistic regulatory environment, and get to market very, very quickly. We could work with any allied partner country and bring the product to market almost instantaneously. So we didn't want to fight that fight. That is a good fight. But the way this bill was structured, we could go almost immediately to development and then commercial.
Convince uranium industry that thorium is useful to them. Well, if this is not possible, other ways have to be done, because you cannot fight financial interests of uranium industry or uranium mines.
The version that we face a lot of that, if you all got it, it's sort of like, well, why don't we find another way to do this? And what we tell people is, since you know, we have a majority of United States citizens here, what we tell people is, it's like, yeah, this whole planet is full of sovereign nations. Why can't any other sovereign nation just pick up the ball? Well, there's a couple reasons, and in my presentation earlier in the day, you saw what happened when an Australian company tried to locate in Malaysia, and they spent $1 billion. The Linus Corporation is now less than 60 days away from bankruptcy, and they were beaten and molested and hammered and sued into basically bankruptcy. So an independent corporation cannot do that. That's the whole reason it's got to be a national rare earth cooperative. No one company can compete against China Inc. The other side, which I guess if you want to, you know, make lemonade out of lemons, the rest of the world, oddly enough, still looks to the United States for guidance. So, you know, you go to another country and you say, hey, how about putting a rare earth refinery in here? And they're like, how come the United States isn't doing it? well, you know, we're not able to get it done. And they're saying, well, I don't know, if you guys aren't doing it, why would we do it? There must be something wrong here. So it's like, yeah, I mean, anyone could, Zimbabwe could do it, you know, the Easter Islands could do it, Madagascar, Brazil, you know, Israel. I mean, you could name 100 countries that have the capability to do this. But and we get calls literally every week from Indonesia, Malaysia, South Africa, UAE, saying, hey, we need you to get this done. And, you know, I sort of bounce back to them like, well, you know, you're a sovereign nation, why don't you get it done? They're like, well, because the United States has to lead on this. So oddly enough, you know, they still believe in it, but I'll tell you this, that's not going to last forever. At some point when things collapse and they see us just whiling away, idling away, falling down, not leading, there is going to be some nation is going to step up and say, God damn it, we cannot rely. These were the leaders of the free world. These are the last superpower, and this is how they act. Well, the hell with them. They don't act. We need to act. Some country X is going to pick up this ball.
China.
Well, the trouble is China is not country X. China is just so, you know, so ascendant. And I'll just say as a little aside here, everyone's like, why do you hate China? And I'm like, I'm jealous of them. We used to do economic policy and industrial policy in this country. And in the early 70s, Milton Friedman and a bunch of his buddies decided economic policy and industrial policy, that's ridiculous. Leave it to the free markets and shareholder value will, you know, guide us to the light. And it hasn't panned out very well.
I just have a simple logic question for Jim and John and perhaps everybody out here. The Department of Defense has made no secret of moving the bulk of their forces into Southeast Asia as a direct result of the mini conflicts that have occurred with the Vietnamese shipping vessels just last week, with Japan, with the Philippines. So it's illogical. All they have to do is stop the rare earth sales to the Department of Defense, and they effectively paralyze the Department of Defense. I mean, do you guys have any comments on that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
one of the knock-on effects of this bill might be people waking up and realizing, hey, why do we need this bill? Oh, because we're 100% reliant on China. So what's a pivot to Asia mean? It's a pivot to nowhere. Because what are we going to do? Are we going to get into a proxy war with China? Are we going to get into an actual shooting war with China? It's going to be one short-ass war. Because, you know, unless they're like, hey, can we time out? Can you give us some more gyroscopes so we could build more cruise missiles to launch at you? I bet they don't give them to us. Right. You know, and so, yeah, that's the logic. We are pivoting to Asia with what? Right. You know, we're going to be like cavemen, you know, fighting with rocks and stones while these guys whip our own weapons at us. Because, you know, buying MagnaQuench and other companies, they not only supply the components for those weapons, they know how to make them now.
Whoever spends the most money, these congressmen are going to win.
You do what money can't buy. You shame them publicly. I mean, you know, you guys have to admit, with a minuscule budget, we got a bill in front of the Senate and the House. And we didn't have to bribe anybody, and we didn't have to, you know, threaten to pull jobs out of a district. So there were some people in Congress that were willing to do the right thing up to a point. And that point was when somebody came along and said, we're going to cause you pain, you know, but we're going to do it in probably a dirty, underhanded, backdoor sort of way. And what Jim is encouraging you all to do, and I encourage you all to do too, is we need to think of ways to drag these people into the sunlight and say, why aren't you supporting this bill? Why aren't you supporting domestic rare earths for the entire world? Why aren't you supporting the energy of the future? Why aren't you supporting cures for cancer? Why aren't you supporting new technologies for this country instead of supporting a foreign power? So that's the, discuss among yourselves. I mean, we're all ears because apparently, we've sort of run out of runway here onto what me and Jim can do. So I'm hoping that one of you guys have the secret sauce that gets us over the hump. Now, it's not dead. The bill still exists, and we have till December 13th to get a bill passed, and probably till December 13th to get into the National Defense Authorization Act. So it's not dead, and hopefully if we can introduce enough pain fast enough, maybe, we can put the CPR paddles of pain on the chest of this bill and shock it back to life, and the sun will rise again and the earth will spin back onto its axis.
On strategy, the strategy I believe is the best possible strategy for us is you got to find a champion who, whether he believes in anything or not, would really like the camera shining on him, okay? So this bill exists. Anybody can offer it. Anybody can offer exactly the same bill with a few changes, right? Because we do need a couple typo changes on it. What we need is a senator to walk onto the floor with two bills in his hand and say, look, obviously every single defense contractor in the United States either has a waiver or they're all breaking the law. And we have a broken system, and we can't possibly supply our defense systems without a national domestic rare earth refinery and value chain. So I'm going to offer two bills on the floor of the Senate for the defense bill. One will be, we're going to do an IG criminal inspection of every single contractor using Chinese parts, and all the suppliers who are falsely relabeling them as U.S. parts. Or we can actually pass this bill. So we can enforce the law, or we can pass this bill. I don't care which, but we're going to do one today. The senator who does that is going to fix this problem, and he's going to be an American hero. We've got to find that guy.